Hi everyone, this is Chaos Chrono, back with another AOA display unboxing. We're on to display number 7, halfway through this case. Let's see what we got today. As we go through the unboxing, once again, just wanted to plug my team's podcast, Team ESP. Feel free to come check it out. And if you're interested in getting to the game, looking for some decks or anything like that, feel free to comment below. Now, moving on to our first deck, we have Elder Pop Komarec. It's a Brobnar, Mars, and Sanctum deck. Looking at Amber Generation, we have 8 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Fuzul, Headhunter, which is a legacy card, 2 copies of Healing Blast, and Prince Derek. Overall, Amber Generation is about 15. For Amber Control, we have Grok and Take Hostages, with support cards in the 4 something creatures we might use for that Take Hostages. So overall, Amber Control is really low here at a 1. Artifact Control, we have Destroy Them All and Gorma Bomb, giving us a 2. For Creature Control, we have Brammo, 2 copies of First Blood, Champion's Challenge, Mother Gun, Containment Field, Destroy Them All, Red Planet Raygun, Sample Collection, Destructive Analysis, and Harder They Come. Supporting cards include fighters like Bingo Bang Bang, Calfine Ogopogo, etc., and Hedris Wall that helps power up our creatures. So overall creature control is pretty high here, looking at 14. For speed, we only have the Mars Ambassador that really helps, so just a speed of 1. Overall, this deck has some interesting points. It's got good board control to start, big bodies for the 2 copies of Healing Blast. We have Sample Collection with Destructive Analysis that kind of is a 2-step purge, which we're kind of seeing more of in Mars decks in the last couple of displays as well. And we have Red Planet Raygun with 6 Mars creatures, so it'll hit a decent amount of damage. Unfortunately, the bad things are every other stat in this deck. All the other numbers are pretty low and lackluster, especially for Amber Control. So it's definitely not going to be competitive. We have 2 copies of First Blood. Obviously, it's an alpha card, so having 2 copies is not always great. But in this deck, it's a bit better just because we have so many Brobnar creatures that the First Blood will hit for a lot of damage. So in summary, it's a slow deck with a lot of creature control, but low Amber Generation, speed, and next to no Amber Control leaves the deck needing more. And I'm going to rate this deck 50. Moving on to deck number 2, we have the Duchess that mind controls poison. It's a Brobnar, Mars, and Sanctum deck. For Amber Generation, we have 7 pips of Amber, with supporting cards including Fuzul, Mars Needs Amber, Mind Warper, 2 copies of Harvester, and Healing Blast, giving us a total of about 14. For Amber Control, we have Grok, Burn the Stockpile, Screech Bomb, Mars Needs Amber, Mind Warper, Take Hostages, and Baron McGavin. The supporting cards include Summaries. So overall, Amber Control is decent at about a 7. Artifact Control, we have Destroyed Them All, so there's something to work with here. For creature control, we have Pound, Containment Field, Destroy Them All, and Harder They Come for direct removal, with supporting cards including 2 copies of Gauntlet of Command, 2 copies of Tremor, Little Rapskull, Amber Conduction Unit, Sorg, Golden Aura, and 1 Stood Against Many. So overall, creature control, I'm still going to rate about a 5 for the direct removal portion, but it can be a little bit stronger given the supporting cards. With speed, we only have 2 support cards in 2 copies of Vesma Think Drone, so the speed is still going to be a 0 since nothing really helps you draw, play, or archive, at least not from your hand or deck, which is important for speeding up your play and increasing cycling for the deck. As for highlights, we have obviously good Amber Control here. It's kind of a toolkit, but a little bit weak in some stats. So it doesn't have a board wipe, which is unfortunate, and one of those key tools that every deck should have just in case you fall behind. There's a lot of heavy board reliance despite the low average creature count. And we have 2 copies of Vesma Think Drone without any play effects on creatures that we can utilize, so that creature becomes moot in terms of its ability. So to summarize, it's another slow deck with a bit of everything, but lacking the board control to capitalize on the board presence in this deck. So I'm also going to rate this about a 50. For deck number 3, we have Blom, the Cleric of Doraclave. It's a Logos, Mars, and Sanctum deck. For Amber Generation, we're looking at 9 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Mars Needs Amber, Mind Warper, Harvester, and Free Markets, giving us a total of about 13. Could be more if Free Markets can hit for more. For Amber Control, we have Mars Needs Amber, Mind Warper, 2 copies of Warden the Redeemed, and Baron McGavin, giving us a total of about 5 for Amber Control. For Artifact Control, we do have Gormavam, so that gives us a solid 1. For Creature Control, we have Bouncing Deathwork, Carpet Flotsam, 2 copies of Containment Field, Exterminate, Destructive Analysis, and Opal Knight, with supporting cards including Pip and 2 copies of Golden Aura, giving us a total of about 7 for Creature Control. For speed, we have Lab Work, Library of Babel, Wild Wormhole, ZOX Researcher, Director of ZOIX, and Incubation Chamber, giving us a total of about 7, with supporting cards including 2 Archimedes, Comet Pheromones, and for Disruption, we have Size 1 Entangler. Now moving into highlights, we have a quick toolkit deck here, and all the specs are kind of low. And once again, there is no board wipe, kind of like the first deck. It's missing that big Amber Control and board control in order for this to be kind of played as a race deck to follow up with that 7 speed. But overall, I'm going to rate this deck at about a 57. Moving on to deck number 4, we have the Stooped Seer. It's a Disc, Sanctum, and Shadows deck. For Amber Generation, we have 13 pips of Amber, 2 copies of Dust Imp, Healing Blast for its effect, Free Markets, Nerve Blast, Sucker Punch that's repeatable, Yangtze Gang, Rend the Fanatic, Redlock, 2 copies, and 2 copies of Treasure Map for its effect, on top of the pips I mentioned, giving me a total of about 24 or more Amber. For Amber Control, we have Warden the Redeemed, Take Hostages, Nerve Blast, Yangtze Gang, Rend the Fanatic, with Key Cost Control and Anguish, and supporting card of Sir Marrows, giving me a total of about 6. For Artifact Control, we have none in this deck, unfortunately. For Creature Control, we have Banish, Unlock Gateway, Wretched Doll, Life for Life, Nerve Blast, Sucker Punch, Oubliette, and 2 copies of Special Delivery. Supporting cards include 2 copies of Golden Aura and 2 copies of Hallowed Shield and Shield of Justice. So that gives me a total of 8 for Creature Control. For speed, we have Yerk and Perplexing Sophistry, and then support card in Exhume, giving me a total of just 2 for speed. Now, in terms of highlights, we do have good Amber Generation, Creature Control, and Amber Control in this deck. There's that double Tesmal with a potential Disc main house given the number of creatures. And we have Life for Life with Rend the Fanatic, which is a nice combo to immediately steal 3 after giving them 1, obviously. The unfortunate parts of this deck are the Artifact Control and Speed, and in terms of specific cards, the Wretched Doll and the Unlock Gateway are, in my opinion, the worst forms of Creature Control. We have 2 copies of Golden Aura, the 2 Hallowed Shield, and the 2 Shield of Justice with only 3 Sanctum creatures to potentially use them on, so that's not going to give you much value. Obviously, Golden Aura can be used for creatures outside the house, so we can target Eater of the Dead, and maybe Gub if it's powered up at that point. Overall, it's a slower toolkit deck without Artifact Control or big Amber Control, so I'm going to rate this deck at a 68, the best we've seen so far from this display. For deck number 5, we have Oddbiorg Box Chinbrass. It's a Brobnar, Sanctum, and Untamed deck. For Amber Generation, we have 9 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Blood Money and Ember Spy Mongrel, so that maybe nets us 2 more. So that's a total of 11 for Amber Generation. For Amber Control, we have 2 copies of Grok, Burn the Stockpile, Screech Bomb, Albeit the Grim, Warden the Redeemed, Take Hostages, Shard of Hope, maybe Ember Spy Mongrel, giving us a total of about 8. We have supporting cards like the 3 Glimmers and Shard of Life, just to recur some of these things that work towards Amber Control as well. For Artifact Control, we have Grasping Vines, that gives us a 0.5. For Creature Control, we have Flamethrower, Gargantus Scrapper, Bilgum Avalanche, Save the Pack, and 2 copies of Nature's Call, with supporting cards including Tremor, 2 copies of Blinding Light, Golden Aura, Persistence Hunting, and Niflgrounds. So overall Creature Control, I'm rating about an 8. For speed, we really only have Doom and the Martyr. 3 Glimmers and Shard of Life only really support that speed, so I'm going to rate it at a 1. As for highlights, the good parts of this deck is the Amber Control and Creature Control, which is decent but kind of inconsistent. The bad parts of this deck, we have the Amber Generation that's lacking and speed that's lacking. And the other things would be there is no board wipe or hard Amber Control, so something like Doorstep to Heaven in this case, right? And we have a Save the Pack with no widespread damage. Flamethrower might be our best option to try to damage some creatures and then hit it with a Save the Pack on the next turn. But obviously there's nothing in-house either, so it's very inefficient. Overall, this deck fits the slower playstyle, but it's lacking key cards to really make it work. So I'm going to rate it at about a 53. Moving on to deck number 6, we have Tomaz, Gentleman Money Latesmith. It is a Logos, Mars, and Untamed deck. For Amber Generation, we have 10 Pips of Amber. Supporting cards include 2 copies of Cutthroat Research for its effect, Eureka for its effect, 2 copies of Harvester, and the Full Moon, giving us a total of about 16. For Amber Control, we have the 2 copies of Cutthroat Research and Key Control in Heart of the Forest, so I'm only going to rate that as a 2. For Artifact Control, there is none in this deck. For creature control, we have Sample Collection and Save the Pack for direct removal, with a bit more support in Heartland Mindlock, Carlector Worm, Mind Worm, Shockworm, Persistence Hunting, Niffle Grounds, and Penpaka Jaga. Still going to rate it at about a 3 though. For speed, we have Hexpeon, Sutterkin, Titan Librarian, Brain Eater, Eureka, Jargoggle, and Witch of the Wilds, with supporting cards like the 2 copies of Backup Copy, Proliferator, Mars First, and Glimmer, giving me a total speed of about 8. So overall, this deck has good speed, but there are several bad components to this deck. One glaring one is the Heart of the Forest with no key cheat or artifact control, so that can potentially hurt you pretty badly. We have conflicts arising out of how to use the archiving, because we have Logos that's trying to archive to make your deck more efficient, and you have the Mars that's trying to archive your opponent's creatures away. And there's no way to get rid of them without returning them to your opponent's hand. We also have very little board control, which is very bad for an AOA deck, and it's not fast enough in order to keep up with a race deck or anything like that either. Overall, this is a quick deck that is lacking heavily in pretty much all areas of control. So I'm going to rate this at about a 48. On to deck number 7, we have Baxter, Sookie, Pastoblade. It's a Logos, Mars, and Sanctum deck. For Amber Generation, we have 9 Pips of Amber, and supporting cards include Binate Rupture. So estimating about 2 gain from there, we'll have a total of 11 for Amber Generation. For Amber Control, we have Warden the Redeemed, 2 copies of Maruk the Marked, Take Hostages, and Proclamation 346E, along with Nizek Resonator. Give me a total Amber Control of 6. For Artifact Control, we have Destroy Them All, which is a solid 1. For Creature Control, we have Poke, Mother Gun, Destroy Them All, Orbital Bombardment, and Sample Collection, with supporting cards in Amber Conduction Unit, Blinding Light, and Shields of Justice, giving me a total of about 5 for Creature Control. For speed, we have Palperbot, 2 copies of Hexpeon, Labwork, Poke, Sutterkin, 3 copies of ZYX Researcher, Fila the Researcher, No Drone, and Mars Ambassador was a supporting card in Combat Pheromones, giving me a total of about 12 for speed. Now, overall highlights, obviously the good parts of this deck is really just the speed. A few other good points, we have Sanctum with fighting and heal or damage protection support. We have lots of archiving from the Logos and Mars sets. We have the Sample Collection with the No Drone combo, which kind of lets you purge your opponent's creatures in a 2-step process. And we have Killzord with some targets, including Sutterkin, Grey Rider, and Mars Ambassador, and maybe Protectrix too. And Protectrix is a legacy, so that's a fun little special card there. As for the bad, it's once again lacking in the rest of the specs for this deck. The capture and cost-based Amber Control is mostly in one house as well, in Sanctum. And with Amber Control being only capture-based, you're only holding the Amber for your opponent, so there's nothing really making them lose that Amber, which will probably hurt you in the long run. Unlike in Worlds Collide, where there's cards that allow you to use Amber that's on your side on your creatures. So to summarize, it's a fast toolkit deck that is a bit board-centric. It's incredibly supportive Logos house, but not enough power in the rest of the houses to capitalize on that support. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at a 57. Moving on to deck number 8, we have the Hierophant that practices money. It's a Dis, Logos, and Untamed deck. For Amber Generation, we have 10 Pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Misery Exploit, Binate Rupture, Cutthroat Research, Darna, 2 copies of Flaxia, and supported by Nature's Call, and Life Web, giving me a total of about 20 or more. For Amber Control, we have 2 copies of Charette, Cutthroat Research, and Life Web, as well as Slash of Broken Dreams for key cost control, giving me a total of about 4. There is no artifact control in this deck. For creature control, we have Call the Weak, Soulkeeper, Onyx Knight, which luckily this deck only has 4 creatures with odd power, so we won't hit ourselves that often, unless our Grovekeeper changes that. Standardized Testing, and supporting cards in Nature's Call, Ink of the Spider, and Amber Imp, giving me a total of about 5 for creature control. For speed, we have Yurt, Library of the Damned, Igor, 3 copies of Wild Wormhole, ZOAX Researcher, Memory Chip, Research Smoko, and Punctuated Equilibrium, giving me a total of about 10. We have some Disruption in Streak, Tesmol, and Punctuated Equilibrium. As for the highlights, we have good Amber generation and speed, so it fits the race deck profile. The bad, we have low control numbers overall, whether it's the Amber artifact or creature control. Though the creature control or board control might be satisfactory given a race deck kind of style. It's also lacking a big Amber control in an already low Amber control deck. While Wormhole may hit the wipes in this deck or the Punctuated Equilibrium when you don't want it to. And we're missing a key cheat in Untamed given the burst potential with Darna and Double Flaxia, along with Nature's Call. So overall, I'm going to rate this deck at about a 62. For deck number 9, we have the Man Who Artlessly Yells at the Church. It's a Brobnar, Shadows, and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we have 9 pips of Amber to start. We have Foozle, Furtive Investors, 3 copies of Throwing Stars, Duskrunner, Merkins potentially, Ice Knight, Darna, and maybe Mimicry as well, giving me a total of about 18, maybe more. For Amber Control, we have Duskrunner and Heist Knight with Miasma, and Heist Knight only has 3 Thieves in the deck to work with. So Amber Control, I'm looking at about a 2. There is no Artifact Control in this deck once again. For creature control, we have First Blood with 7 Brobnar creatures, Guard Hand to Scrapper, 3 copies of Throwing Stars, Bone Rot Venom, Lights Out, Save the Pack, Nature's Call, and Piranha Monkeys. Supporting cards include Into the Fray, Relentless Assault, Signal Fire, and Persistence Hunting, giving me a total of about 8. There isn't really anything that directly impacts speed, so I'm going to rate it as a 0, but supported by Signal Fire, Dust Switch, and World Tree for efficiency. And for disruption, we have the little Rapskull along with the Merkins. As for highlights, it's got sufficient Ember generation with decent creature control. It's got that Gang or Not combo, the Juggernaut with Gang or Chieftain. It has Bad Penny with 3 copies of Throwing Stars, so there's a good purpose for that Bad Penny. It guarantees 1 Ember for each time you play that Throwing Stars, and maybe even more if Dust Switch happens to be on the field. As for the bad, we have very little Amber control and speed, and also a double alpha in Brobnar in terms of First Blood and Gargantua Scrapper. Other interesting things, we have a potential for this play, where you have your big Brobnar board on the table. You have Piranha Monkeys, Darna, and Nature's Call in hand. You can definitely burst up to a lot of Amber and then key charge for maybe your last key. Just missing that archiving or speed to really make it more consistent. So in summary, it's a deck with some fun combos to pull off, but being slow and not having Amber control means it's not going to be very competitive. So I'm going to rate this deck at a 59. For deck number 10, we have the Warden of Gobany. It's a Mars, Sanctum, and Shadows deck. For Amber generation, we're starting with 13 pips of Amber. We have 2 copies of Harvester, Total Recall, Healing Blast, Furtive Investors, Gamgee, Throwing Stars, Umbra, 2 copies of Dust Runner, and Rig Lottery, which brings it to about 20 or more for Amber generation. For Amber control, we have Oddbiorg, Warden, the Redeemed, Take Hostages, Baron Mangavin, Gamgee, Umbra, and the 2 Dust Runners, giving me a total of about 7, supported by Sir Mouse as well. There is no artifact control once again. For creature control, we have Tixel Beambuckler, maybe Key Abduction if you're playing against Mars, the Spirit's Way, Throwing Stars, Whistling Darts, and Special Delivery, with supporting cards in Golden Aura and Eye of Judgment, giving me a total creature control of about 6. For speed, we have Dust Chronicles, Perplexing Sophistry, and Rig Lottery to cycle through our deck, and support cards like the Proliferator and Sigil of Brotherhood, and some disruption in Shockworm and the Amber Conduction unit. So overall speed, I'm rating about a 4. So overall highlights, we have good Amber generation and decent Amber control. We have the OG combo of Key Abduction with Total Recall for bringing back the creatures outside of Mars that's on your battle line. We have Vesma Think Drone that can work with the Texel Beambuckler and Oddbiorg in case you need to reuse them just for their play effects. We have Purge effects that can help slim down our own deck to make it more efficient. And we have Healing Blast with 2 copies of Dominator, so that goes, at least there's some big creatures that the Healing Blast could potentially target. Unfortunately, it is a slower deck with less creature control, and in AOA that's a problem. It's got 2 copies of Dust Runner with only 3 of the Shadows creatures, so there's not many targets to be able to use that upgrade right away. So yeah, overall, it's a slower deck. It's lacking a bit in each category except for Amber Generation, so I'm going to rate it at about a 64. Moving on to deck number 11, we have Coptihost, the Peasant of the Harbor. It's a Brobnar, Dis, and Shadows deck. For Amber Generation, we have 14 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Smith, Schuler, Nerve Blast, Throwing Stars, Yanti Gang, and 2 copies of Routine Job, giving me a total of about 22 for Amber Generation. For Amber Control, we have Charette, Schuler, Nerve Blast, Yanti Gang, 2 copies of Routine Job, as well as the doubled Grunt Buggy with up to 7 creatures that count towards that number to increase their opponent's key cost, giving me a total of about 8 for Amber Control. For Artifact Control, we do have Poltergeist, giving us a solid 1. For creature Control, we have 2 copies of Flamethrower, Call the Weak, Gongoozle, Red Hot Armor, Nerve Blast, Sucker Punch, and Throwing Stars. Supporting cards include Into the Fray, Tremor, Rock Rolling Giant, Life Ward, and Eater of the Dead. So overall creature control, I'm going to rate at about an 8. For speed, we have the 2 copies of Dust Chronicles, and supporting cards in Exhume and Not Finished With You, giving me a total of about 3 for speed. And we have some disruption in Small, Gungoogle, and Life Ward. So for the highlights of this deck, it is actually a solid toolkit deck with sufficient numbers in all categories except for the speed. So with that being said, the other missing pieces are a board wipe in case of emergency and hard Amber Control that would be really well paired with the double Grunt Buggy, increasing key costs. And yeah, as a slower deck, it's fine because the playstyle with a double Grunt Buggy is meant to be slower. And you need more control to really run with this deck. And I think this deck has just enough to make that viable, but some playtesting might be necessary. It would have been better if we could have seen like a board wipe and a TMTP, or Too Much to Protect. But overall, not bad at all. I'll rate this deck at about a 70. Moving on to the last deck, we have Testlore of the Rogue's Crater. It's a Dis, Logos, and Untamed deck. Starting with Amber Generation, we have 9 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Dust Imp, Misery Exploit, Tentacus, Rustnar, Ember Spine Mongrel, and potentially Mimicry, giving me a total of about 14 for Amber Generation. For Amber Control, we have Anguish, so I'll just rate that at a 1. For Artifact Control, we have Tentacus, Crazy Killing Machine, and Rustnar, giving me a total of about 1.5. For Creature Control, we have Banish, Hysteria, Pain Reaction, Standardized Testing, Crazy Killing Machine, Save the Pack, and Quicksand. Supporting cards include Relentless Assault and Persistent Hunting, giving me a total about 6. For speed, we have the 2 Wall Wormholes, ZYX Researcher, Feel of the Researcher, and Jorgoggle. And supporting cards include Exhume, Not Finished With You, and 2 copies of Archimedes and 2 copies of Glimmer, giving me a total of about 6 for speed. And there's also some disruption in the 2 copies of Sizable Entangler. Overall highlights, it's a toolkitty deck, but it's a bit weaker, especially compared to the last one. Another good thing about this deck is that it has Mimicry. That's always a good thing. For the bad, we're severely lacking Amber Control, so that immediately removes it from being a competitive deck, especially when it's not a full-on race deck. It's got Save the Pack without widespread damage, which unfortunately we've been seeing a lot of recently. As for interesting pieces, we do have a Maverick, Relentless Assault, which is pretty cool. Not that it really functions much to this deck and how it wants to work, but hey, with the Scullion, Anguish to get some damage on it, and some other big creatures, we could use that to do some board control. So overall, I am going to rate it pretty low at about a 49. Well, that was all 12 of the decks in this 7th display. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video and found this content to be valuable, just seeing how somebody else appraises it. If you guys have any suggestions, any critiques, or just something positive to share, feel free to post that below in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Consider subscribing to the channel to help support it. And yeah, look forward to some more Keyforge content on its way. With that being said, always remember, be kind and happy forging.